right. Good morning, everybody. I'm calling this meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It is 11:17 on May 21st, 2025, and I'm Barbara Neal. As a reminder, the meeting's being recorded and the recording will be posted to the task force webpage following the meeting. We'll start with our regular roll call of task force members. So please verbally acknowledge your presence when I call your name. Dan Batesy.
Here.
Ron Kumitz.
Here.
Jim Mack.
Here.
All right, and I do not see Michael Wright on just yet. And we will not have Jen. Dan is here as a designee of Jen, and Paul White is also not going to be with us today, but we do have a quorum. So also joining us is Emily Mullaney from Department of Public Safety as our administrative support, and our project management team, Rick and Dom from Televate, are
Morning.
here.
Morning, everyone.
Morning. I see Jason Malloy from Mission Critical Partners is on the call. Morning, Jason.
Good morning. Good morning.
And let's see, we have two representatives from Department of Public Safety, one of whom at least will be presenting to us today. Corey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Corey Chase. I'm the Director of the Radio Technology Services Division here at the Department of Public Safety.
Nice to see you, Corey. And Robin Nilsson, could you introduce yourself? We're not hearing you, Robin, if you're speaking.
Sorry for that delay. My computer was acting up. So I'm Robin Nilsson. I'm the IT director. I'm with ADS and I support the Department of Public Safety.
Thank you, Robin. And Secretary Riley Hughes, could you introduce yourself?
Good morning. This is Denise Riley Hughes. I'm the Secretary for the Agency of Digital Services, and I'm the State CIO.
Thanks for joining us. And I believe I've gotten everyone from state government and task force consultants or members accounted for. Looks like we have one member of the public joining us. Senator Renner, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Recent Senator and recent member of JITAC, Irene Renner.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to approval of the agenda. The agenda was distributed to task force members by email. It's also available on our webpage. Do task force members have any changes to the agenda? Alrighty. Hearing nothing, we'll consider the agenda approved and move on to, oops, I see Michael Wright just joined us. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Move on to approval of the minutes from the May 7th meeting. That was regular meeting number 50. Are there any changes needed for these minutes? All right, is there a motion to approve the minutes from May 7?
Make a motion to accept the minutes as printed.
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Ron. Any discussion? I'll just note that I'll abstain from this vote because I wasn't present and I haven't listened to the full recording. So all those in favor of approving the minutes from May 7th, raise your hand or indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, I see 1, 2, 3 hands, I believe. And Dan, thank you. Anyone opposed? All right, the minutes are approved for the May 7th meeting. And next item on the list is a presentation by Director Corey Chase from Radio Technology Services. Dan, why don't I hand this over to you to kind of cue up the discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Barb.
Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you, everyone, for entertaining this. I wanted to give it just a little bit of context, in particular, because I want to be very clear about our intent with this presentation. By our, I mean the Department of Public Safety. Corey is our Director of Radio Technology Services, and his team, as many of you know, is currently implementing some work that we're doing around the COPS grant, the $9 million COPS grant that we've been upgrading a number of things on with. He came to me to talk about the potential of expanding that project to include what he's about to bring to all of you. We think that there is merit in this project, enough to bring to your attention, but we also appreciate that it's premature, that it is before a plan comes out of this group that would necessarily align it. So it is a bit of a solution looking for a problem. Now, that said, the rationale for bringing it to you today is that there is some time sensitivity with this. And Corey will explain that if we were to integrate what we're talking about into some work that's going on right now, it's relatively easy, much less expensive. If later on we were to do this after that work had been completed, it's much more complicated, much more expensive, which is the reason we're bringing it today. Now, for the purposes of our intent, this is not intended to be a plan that we're foisting upon you. This is not intended to be a foregone conclusion that we're going to do this. Our intention is to bring it to you to see what feedback you have, to see if there is indeed merit for this project. If there is enthusiasm for it, we will turn it into a formal proposal, a formal recommendation from our department. If there's not, well, we'll shelve it and move forward. But we wanted to give it to you folks just with the notion that as this plan develops, it gets exponentially more complicated the longer we wait and the more this is delayed, if this is indeed something that we want to do. So Corey, with that preamble, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the specifics.
Thank you, Dan. So in a nutshell, let me start by saying, excuse me, let me start by saying, to reiterate the plan that we are implementing for the COPS grant. So the COPS grant, the Department of Justice Community Oriented Policing technology grant, it fits into two kind of batches of projects. The first batch is sort of hardening. We've been busy at work on that. That includes things like generators and batteries and things that happen inside buildings. We were able to get the Department of Justice to authorize us to move forward with that. We've been in a bit of a predicament with the Department of Justice about how to proceed with the other batch of projects. That's the things that happen outdoors. Really, the outdoor component of what our next phase is pretty limited. We're talking about replacing antennas on existing antennas, on existing tower sites. That still has left us in a quandary about how do we confirm to that NEPA, the environmental protection requirements for towers have been satisfied so that we can use the grant fundings to do that. We're still in the process of trying to work that out with Department of Justice, but we have a meeting of the minds, and we're now moving to formalize that. And we anticipate that we will be able to get started on the bulk of the project this summer. So in essence, the bulk of the project that we're talking about is we want to change the existing analog multicast LMR system for state police from its current status to be a digital simulcast network. When we do that, we're going to be making pretty significant investments in new radios and all of the data networking and timing equipment and engineering that goes behind it to make a 10-zone digital simulcast network for the state police. That investment is includes all of the radios and the hardware, but it includes the engineering that goes behind it, the propagation analysis, and importantly, all of the site prep work to get to be able to do this big change in all of the 50 sites that we're going to be touching. That means we're going to be doing site analysis, structural analysis, getting permits, all of the lot of high touch work that has to happen to make this change. You wouldn't necessarily need to do all of this work if you're just doing one at a time, but the fact that we're touching 50 sites is a significant effort. All of the logistics paperwork that happens in the background to make that happen, to do procurements, to do scheduling and project management and logistics for a project of this size is a pretty significant undertaking. The thought occurs to us and this is driven by staff here at RTS. Since we're going to be doing this work anyway for the UHF channels for state police, the marginal cost of doing that same work to make a VHF network is relatively small compared to the effort that you would have to do that later. So in essence, what the proposal that we would consider, that you contemplate, is while we're doing the UHF network, we could also do a VHF network at the same time at the same locations. So the key factor here is we're not talking about designing and building a new network to some set of specifications of coverage and coming up with new tower sites. The essence of this proposal is, while we're doing these 50 sites, UHF, we could add a VHF channel that would provide the same coverage from the same sites. We're not talking about expanding to new sites. We can't take that on at this point. That's just that would make our project untenable. But we could do what we're talking about is adding a VHF channel, a single VHF channel at the sites that we're already talking about, while we're doing our UHF work. So key factors that would have to be addressed here. You'd have to figure out, first and foremost, you would have to figure out what channels you would use, what VHF channels we could use for this. We think we've come up with an idea of what channels potentially could be used by looking at what the primary VHF channel is in every one of the 10 VSP zones. The essence of this idea is that we would ask that entity that's viewing VHF in each of the 10 zones to allow the use of that channel, of that VHF frequency resource for this statewide network. So we would have to have 10 different entities allow the use of their channel for this VHF network to work. You'd have 10 different VHF channels across the state. And the most logical thing to do is to use the existing channels that are already being used for VHF fire and EMS service in that territory. That, of course, is going to create some frustration for that entity, the entity that would have to stop using their channel because it's going to be used for this network. We think that certainly there's a concern there. The entity would be giving up the use of their frequency. The benefit, though, to that entity is that they get coverage, and the coverage would be coming off of the state resources, and there'd be backhaul to a common center. So that's the first problem. The second issue is that this idea is solely and exclusively targeted at the VHF LMR network. We're not talking about making any changes. This idea that we're talking about does not in any way contemplate changing how dispatching is done. the way that we conceive that in this idea that we're tossing around, dispatching would be done by the same entity that's doing it now, and we could either provide them dispatch consoles that they could use to connect into our dispatching into our network, or alternatively, we could assist whatever dispatching console they're using to connect into our network. So again, the primary issue is the entity that's doing that has the VHF channel would somebody would need to forfeit their channel, because getting new VHF channels is almost impossible. And the second issue is that the second concern I raised is that we're not talking about making any changes to how dispatching is done. We're solely talking about how the LMR network that is used for that dispatching is managed. A third very important issue is that there would need to be some kind of an entity that has governance and control over how this network is deployed, maintained, and monitored going forward. And I would assume that this entity, the Public Safety Communication Task Force, could be charged with that oversight, and it could move to some other entity, but that definitely is beyond our recommendation. That is up to this entity to figure out how governance should work. I would say that before this can happen, whatever entity that is going to be tasked with governance for this network, they would have to sort out how local entities could deploy additional tower sites to flush out and improve the coverage. So for instance, let's just say you're in zone A1, VSP zone A1, and the entity that's providing fire and EMS in that coverage in that area forfeits or not forfeits, but they allow the use of their VHF frequency for this network. They might want to improve coverage in that area at a later date after this initial network is deployed. They might need to add new towers to do that. There should be a process by which they can be allowed to do that, and the governance structure should support that. Should provide rules and governance to facilitate that expansion. So we've kind of kicked the tires about this. We think that this is a staff-driven issue here at RTS. We think that makes sense for someone to think about. But I want to reiterate what Deputy Commissioner Basie said, that we're not driving this. We think that you ought to contemplate it. I wouldn't even go so far as to say that we recommend it, but we think that it would be prudent to at least give you the opportunity to think about it. It would be most expeditious if funding were to come to allow us to procure this and do this work at the same time that we're doing our procurement for our phase 2 effort, this simulcast for the state police. So it would be most beneficial to us if you decided to do this, if you did it sooner than later. We don't have an exact timeline about that, but we're hoping to get started on our effort, developing scope of work, developing the work of what needs to be done later this summer. So it'd be useful to know if we're going to be also doing VHF to know that sooner than later. We think that we haven't asked vendors for quotes. We don't know exactly how much this is going to cost, but based on our kind of gut look at what we expect our costs to be for the UHF network, we think that this can be done for under $3 million. So if your entity is able to identify channels that could be used, and you're able to identify to allocate funding of under $3 million, we think that we could, when this simulcast network is built, we could end up with a statewide VHF network, a single channel across the entire state in a 10-zone 10 different zones. So there'd be one channel, one VHF channel in every one of the 10 zones. And this channel could be used for fire and EMS in that zone. And all fire and EMS could be done on that single channel. You could also make it opt-in. So if entities are satisfied with doing their fire and EMS in that zone and they want to keep it and they don't want to move into this zone, you could make it an opt-in and let them choose to opt into this. We think that you should still build a 10 zone system and provide statewide VHF coverage, but you should contemplate making it an opt-in. But again, that's just a recommendation. This is something that you would have to, that's a kind of question that would fall to your governance structure that is created for this. So I think I've talked a lot about it. This is just to reiterate, this is a high level idea. This has not even gotten to the point of being a proposal and much less a plan. It is just an idea that we think it's prudent to give you the insight and give you the opportunity to consider it. So with that, I'll turn it back to the Deputy Commissioner Batesy if you have any closing remarks on it. You're on mute.
I don't really have anything more to add. Again, we're thinking about this just in terms of efficiency, not in terms of a good idea, but we're happy to hear your thoughts. And again, the other piece is I don't think we necessarily have to decide this today. What we're looking for is your feedback. So if you want more information, we'll be glad to chat with you more about it.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Corey. Ron, your hand's up. Go ahead.
So this may be putting the cart before the horse, but has any thought been put into the topology of that kind of network? Is the thought to make this, a digital trunk system or a digital conventional system or an analog system? Or is that just simply something that has not been thought about?
So I can answer that. The idea that we have here at RTS, just our staff kind of mulling this over, is that it would be most prudent to make this an analog simulcast network, because the vast majority of radios that are out there by first responders in Vermont today have analog VHF radios. So it would be most prudent to make this an analog, also an analog network, but make it a simulcast network to improve coverage and usability throughout the entire zone.
Okay, yeah, I mean, you're not going to get an argument from me on that, because I think we've even had this conversation that the idea of trying to implement, P25 for fire and EMS is really an unsustainable direction to go. The cost is just prohibitive on the subscriber side, the subscriber unit side. So I would tend to agree with that. I think that I don't disagree with that philosophy at all.
And to be clear, this is not a trunked system and it's not a multi-channel system. We are building a single channel UHF 10 zone simulcast system for Vermont State Police. And we would contemplate building a similar 10 zone analog. The State Police network the State Police channel is digital simulcast, but we contemplate the idea of this proposal that we're bringing to you is 10 zone analog simulcast network for fire and EMS, and it wouldn't be digital, it wouldn't be trunked.
Okay, I mean that as soon as you said the word analog, you removed my immediate gut reaction. So life is good.
Okay. Other questions or comments for Corey? Dom, go ahead.
Thanks. I didn't want to preclude any task force members asking questions, but I did have a couple for Corey. And Corey, I appreciate the idea, certainly. Just a couple of clarifications, and we may have talked about this before, and I apologize, but the concept for the VHF system will utilize existing microwave backhaul that the state operates, and potentially, I guess, some use with um, the uh, the Vermont utility system as well. Is that correct?
So the planned digital simulcast network, so let me start this way. Our current the RTS current analog multicast network for Vermont State Police is on 40 sites. And we propose to expand that to 10 additional sites with that are Velco sites. So we would have a 50 site network that's digital simulcast. And we propose to the idea of this idea that we're talking about.
Right.
We would do the same thing with VHF analog simulcast with the same backhaul, and
Right.
we would deliver connectivity to our dispatch centers, the two PSAPs, and we would also for VHF to make this work, we would because we don't want to touch the way that dispatching is done, we
Right.
would have to drop in a connectivity to any dispatch center that wants to be able to access this VHF network. So we would have to give them access to what either we would have to put in a last mile connection to their dispatch center so that they would have access to the back end of the network
Right.
and then be able to dispatch on the service to transmit on any of the LMR channels that they need access to. They would either need to use because our network is built on the Avtec the Motorola Avtec dispatching system. The most convenient method would be for them to use Motorola Avtec dispatch consoles. But we could entertain putting in infrastructure to support other consoles if that's necessary.
Where would for the VHF network concept, where would the simulcast control and voting equipment be located? There's 10 simulcast cells you're proposing. Would there be 10 locations, or is that all proposed to be housed at one of the state dispatch centers?
I think that's still up in the air, and I think we don't have an answer on that. I
Okay.
think that most probably they would be as it is now. Our A troop is all controlled out of our Williston Center, and our
Okay.
B troop is all controlled out of our Westminster Center.
Westminster. Okay.
And we do that because those facilities are easily accessible and have good power and backhaul and connectivity. The tower sites we have access to, but sometimes the weather can get in the way.
Right. Question about the antennas. This concept would include one VHF antenna at each of the 50 sites you mentioned. So as you do your structural analyses at those sites, you would include the requirement for that antenna, correct?
Yeah. Yes. We may there are existing VHF at many sites, and so we would probably roll this through combiners, and we would probably have to use combiners in certain sites. There might not be ability to put up a new VHF antenna, but there are VHF on all these sites already. So we would have to look at that, and we would, because we have on most sites we have service for either VCOM or Fish and Wildlife.
Okay, so some of this might use existing VHF antennas.
Well, we anticipate as part of this project replacing all of the antennas for the UHF system, because we want to have the most efficient simulcast service. So we're gonna change out all of our project. Our COPS grant, the simulcast project, contemplates replacing all of the antennas at every site. We would anticipate changing them, and we don't know yet because this is just an idea. Just to reiterate, this is not this is not a flushed out plan. This is just an idea that we're coming to you to ask if it makes sense for us to try and flush it out some more. At this point, we don't know the answer to this question, but we could either put up new VHF antennas, but probably in most cases, since we have VHF there, we would put in a combiner and use existing hardline and replace the antennas on the tower.
Okay. All right.
Corey, I have a
Thanks.
question. Have you confirmed that you have a sufficient room in each of the equipment shelters to support this proposal?
So this, to reiterate, Rick, this is not a proposal yet. This is just an idea, and we
Sure.
haven't done any of the due diligence. We haven't done any of that. We have we have facilities, and there's room in most of them. But certainly there are some where space is a problem, and we're going to have to deal with that. I think that the bigger question is, excuse me, Deputy Commissioner.
I was just going to say that I think the very nature of this conversation is to direct us whether to do more due diligence.
Right.
Because if everyone in this group says, boy, that's a bad idea, I don't want Corey's team burning any more energy, any more effort on this than has already been done.
So my thought on this is that regardless of whether this overreaching idea of a statewide, system goes forward immediately, I think that it would be prudent as you embark on the project that you're working on, that each of those sites be equipped with a substantial VHF antenna, or the ones that are at sites be replaced and upgraded where necessary to something substantial that could support the build out of either a statewide system or regional systems that might co-locate on the same towers. I think that would be, no matter what's decided about this idea, now that we've centered on calling it an idea, that would be a really good use of time and money.
That's exactly the kind of feedback we need, Ron. And again, either positive or negative, that's the direction that we're looking for. Is this worthy of more investment of both time, energy, treasure, whatever.
So this is not my wheelhouse. I'll just say that right up front. But I'm trying to understand the sort of the pros and cons of this things, right? Corey, you talked about a primary agency in each of these zones would have to give up or forfeit their channel. And yet you said the benefit was that they would also have coverage and backhaul, right? So there'd be some resiliency built in. So how will it work if they're giving up their channel? What does that mean exactly? That it's open up to other entities to use, or it's now would be managed by radio technology or whatever governance group came in? Can you just make the pros and cons clearer to me?
That's a very good question, and that's a very complicated question. But you're asking the right question. So, in order for this to work, in order for what we're proposing to work, we would need to have a VHF channel that we could use to provide coverage throughout one of the VSP zones. So I don't know, pick in Brattleboro. So you pick the entire Brattleboro barracks zone. We would need the idea of this idea is that someone would not forfeit, but allow the use of an existing VHF channel. We would have to we'd have to do frequency coordination and make sure that channel could be used throughout the entire zone. And then we would, assuming assuming the entity that has the channel was willing to let us use it, we'd have to determine whether it creates interference problems with the FCC and other bordering states and their entities around it. That's not a simple task, as Dom and Rick will tell you. And even if someone blessed this idea and turned it into a real proposal, and even if the entity was willing to give up its frequency, it's still not a slam dunk that you're going to get that frequency coordinated. But assuming that we were able to get it coordinated and we were able to get it to be used throughout the entire area, we would need to be transmitting that on our sites, and wherever it is that they're transmitting on today, they'd kind of have to stop. They'd have to stop doing that. They'd have to stop transmitting it on their sites. Let's just say that we're on Streeter Hill in near Brattleboro, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Mount Snow is another key site down there. So if and this is say that the entity down there is transmitting on 2 other sites, in order to make simulcast work, we'd have to be transmitting on it would have to be on our sites. So they would have to stop doing they'd have to stop doing it on their sites, stop doing and not do the backhaul anymore, not maintain their towers anymore. And so the benefit for the benefit for them is that they no longer have the cost and headache of maintaining tower sites. They don't have to do backhaul, they don't have to maintain the tower. And they get coverage, because the coverage will now be from our state-owned tower sites instead of their tower sites. The headache for them is that they no longer have local control. They're no longer picking and where they're going to run their sites. They're dependent on us, the state, to maintain their network, for their tower site network for them. So that's a benefit. That's a headache for them. That's why it's important that this entity have some entity create a governance structure that provides a mechanism by which they can add additional sites if they want to. I know that there was a lot of discussion in the initial analysis, initial kind of discussion about this. When Mission Critical presented its ideas about how to develop a new statewide network, some entities were really wanting to have a network that was built for statewide access at a 95% coverage with portables. Well, the state network with our current 40 sites is designed around mobile coverage, not portable, mobile. And I don't think that it wasn't designed at 95% coverage. And this idea that we're talking about here it's not built around the idea of we want to design it we're going to build another 100 sites around the state to achieve 95% coverage for portables. It's built around a different design concept of, these are the sites we have. Let's make it work with the sites we have today. And let's try and achieve what we can with what we have, not let's try and achieve the perfect with a budget that we don't know about. So to answer your question, an entity would have to give up their frequency and give up their network, their backhaul, their tower sites. But what they receive in return is they get coverage off of the state sites that are already there. A good way to assess what that current coverage is they can look at where they see UHF coverage from Vermont State Police today. We think that the new coverage that's going to come from this network is going to be at least that good. It's probably going to be better.
Okay, so there might be questions that come up about, if the entities that are being asked to give up or allow the use of, I like that term better.
Right. They keep the frequency. We don't want their frequency. They're just allowing it to be used for this purpose.
There may be questions about investment that they have already made in that infrastructure, right? That may be one of the questions. And another question that came into my mind, would there be cost to those entities to allow, so you're now using that channel, and you're maintaining the infrastructure that supports that. And so will that cost those entities anything that they would be paying to the state or to whoever? That's another question. And if it's a single channel and there are multiple agencies using that single channel, that would be different than it is now, correct? I mean, there are multiple channels in these areas now. That's a question.
Yes,
Okay.
there is.
So,
Okay.
what we're contemplating here in this idea is we want what the idea is a 10 zone system. So in every zone, one entity would forfeit their channel, their VHF channel, and we would build a single VHF channel for that that zone. And we're basing it on the VSP barrack zones, which are roughly county kind of shapes.
Mhm.
So, and we're doing that because we're proposing that is this in this idea because that's the topology that we're doing, and it makes it easiest for us to implement that way. And the suggestion here of this idea is you could make a single channel in every zone for a single VHF channel in every zone that could be used for fire and EMS in that zone. You could make it optional, and you could say, you opt in, you use this channel, and there's no cost to you. Use it. You don't want to opt in, you want to run your own network, you want to have, you can do that. There's no requirement that you opt in. But I think that entities will find that having free access to a channel, or nothing's free, but the access to a channel is yes, the channel might get cluttered, there might be more traffic, but I think that having access to a channel that may be cluttered is better than trying to find a way to keep your existing channel operational in a situation of declining budgets where costs are going up, everything needs to be replaced. Having access to a channel that's opt-in might be beneficial. So, to be clear, you asked about budget. What we're talking about here is just an idea. We don't have the answers to all of this. We're just looking for feedback. Certainly, if we operate, we are already operating this network. We're operating the backhaul. We're operating the everything from the dispatch console to the mountains. What we're talking about here is adding another channel to the network that we're already operating. There's going to be an additional cost for us to maintain 50 additional, because we're talking about at least 50 new radios. That's more work, but it's much less expensive for us to taking on maintaining an additional radio at these sites than it would be for every entity around the state to do the same thing, because we already have the network. The network's already being used and being paid for by our primary task, maintaining the network for Vermont State Police. And adding the additional incremental costs to us to have an additional technician or something, yes, there will be additional cost for this. We haven't sorted out that additional cost, but it's likely to be not significant. And as I just think through this idea, I don't think that it's prudent to be asking entities to pay for that. Probably it's best for us to look for our own budget. I don't know, we don't have an answer to that, but I don't think it's a significant issue.
Okay. And one more question, then I'll go to you, Ron. Is it fair to say that whether these VHF antennas or devices or whatever they are, whether those go on or not has no impact on the state police?
That's right.
Okay, so the benefits would be seen by the fire and EMS community, and it wouldn't have a positive or negative impact on that state police plans and communications and all of that. Okay, I just
That's right.
wanted.
We
to
already
make
have
sure.
backhaul to all these sites. We already have generators. We already have everything else there. And all we would be doing is adding another channel on the existing platform, and then giving access to the wherever it is that's doing dispatch, the whatever dispatch center, we would let them use that channel for dispatch. Doesn't change the service for us at all,
Okay,
for state police.
thank you. Ron, you had your hand up a minute ago.
I still have my hand up, but I decided my
Oh.
arm was tired.
Sorry.
My question is it possible that some of the resources that have been deployed for the VCOM system could be redeployed and repurposed for this to save money and all that kind of stuff?
It's possible, but unlikely. As I understand it, most of the VCOM radios are the base station radios are a different brand. I don't know the answer right off the top of my head, but I think it's unlikely. Some of I know that there are VCOM VHF antennas on most sites, and probably we could use those antennas for this project, but it might require a combiner.
I would say we would happily explore that notion,
Yes.
however.
Yeah, of
Well,
course, of course.
I think in the big picture that at some point as as a state, we need to take a really hard look at the value that we are getting out of that VCOM system. I realize what its intention was, but at some point maintaining a system that is not being used, with where the cost benefit is like in the toilet, really, at some point we may need to simply say that this was a great idea, it didn't work out, we learned from our mistakes, and we're not going to spend any more money on it. Because just throwing more money into it continuously, if nobody's using it, is it's a waste.
Absolutely agree with you, Ron.
Got it.
Me too.
Okay, I see Rick's hand is up. Go ahead.
Yes,
Rick.
thank you. Let me make sure I remove it. So I just wanted to share with the team that that there are a number of other options available. So Corey is talking about a local entity, whoever may have the ideal frequency to contribute to this wide area network. And I think that I wouldn't use terms like forfeit or give it away. They're going to contribute it. I think what you said earlier, we don't want to scare away, and I don't think we lose local control. That was the purpose and intention behind governance, so that there would be a governance committee. Say there's an overall governance board, and there's a committee that's radio, land mobile radio. However it turns out, obviously we have that work to do. But the locals could also maintain their existing sites and add it to the overall network so that they have more robust coverage. So this umbrella that Corey is proposing provides an economic benefit and does cover, because we know the scope of the state patrol, the state police network is very robust. And they're adding more sites is going to even make it more robust. But there are sites that already exist that could be contributed to this network within various communities. And most of these communities have multiple frequencies. So while they might, by one frequency might be, allocated for the network that Corey is discussing, we can add additional sites to expand to maintain in-building coverage in the local community. So I think what we're getting, we don't want to lose sight of the concept that this initial this per plan can as a foundation on which locals can build on and use their existing assets out to modify them, but nothing really changes in the fact that locals can continue through a governance model could continue to expand or add additional sites. Obviously, there's economics to that we're not discussing now, but I just wanted to be sure that was brought up as well, because that locals, we want, in the end, you want a regionalized network or a statewide network that anyone can use. And this concept does meet some of the options that have been provided in the report and others that we have discussed as a team. So Dom and I have had multiple conversations with Corey and others, and I just wanted to share with you, without providing any direct opinion, that we've had some additional conversation, and there are other considerations, and we're happy to provide the task force any assistance in further evaluating it as we go along. You're muted, Barb.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Rick, for your
You're
comments and
welcome.
input. And Ron, go ahead.
I think that Rick hit on something. As I that you probably all recall that at one point or another I've mentioned that I am a big advocate of the regional simulcast voting system concept as a solution particularly for fire and EMS. And as I've talked to groups of firefighters over the past few months, people are kind of receptive to that sort of a thing, but there is still a tendency for many of them to have one of two comments immediately. The first one is, we like having our own, and because I'm one of them, I am able to simply say that's really immature. Like, you need to grow up and do the right thing, to make things work. And then the second one is, we're on our own channel, and we haven't explored any shared options, because we don't want to hear people continuously talking about stuff when that doesn't really belong on the radio and everything else. And so the obvious thing there is there need to be some rules, and once again, people need to grow up, and if people that are part of a certain agency can't be responsible about using the radio, then somebody needs to walk up to them and take their radio away. That's just the way it is. If you want to make all this work and you don't want to spend billions of dollars so that everybody can have their own system that works great, then we need to get together on this. So I guess my question, in keeping with the original idea, is I assume this is going to kind of work. The concept is to make this work similar to the VSP system, where the A troop people don't hear the B troop people and all the other stuff, so that it really is kind of a regional system. Is that what I'm getting out of this, or have I misinterpreted the idea?
I think the idea is that we would create a VHF channel in each zone, and it would be kind of the default fire and EMS channel in that zone, and it would be a analog simulcast coverage, so it should have reasonable coverage throughout each zone, and entities could opt into it and use it, or they could keep running their own channel separately. And I think that over time, if there's a free, a state provided, I don't mean to say free, but a state provided channel that provides coverage throughout that zone, I think, people will look at their budget and say, do we really need our own channel, or can we just opt in and use that one?
Well, and I think that is a direction that has some merit. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of 3, county areas: Grandal County, Addison County, Rutland County, that all substantially do their operation, their dispatch operations on a single channel. And there is some smattering of of those, like, I want my own and I don't want to listen to other people within those areas. So I think what you're saying is valid, and I haven't looked at some of the other areas. I know that in Franklin County they started building a simulcast voting system, and they encountered that we don't want to listen to other people thing. So I think if that's what you're, if that's the the philosophy, then it really does embrace the whole regional simulcast voting system, and I'd be behind doing that.
Okay. I see some other nods, or another nod from Jim. I'm wondering if there's, we've spent quite a bit of time on this. Hopefully we've given Corey and Dan at least some good initial feedback. Are there any other comments or questions from task force members? Jim, Matt, go ahead.
I think they're looking, are you guys looking for us to say to go forward studying this? If so,
Yes.
do we need to give them some type of motion to do that?
Well, it doesn't need to be in this meeting. I mean, you could give it some more thought, but we are looking for your feedback about whether you want us to evaluate this.
I would almost suggest that it probably shouldn't be in this meeting, because I'd like to take the opportunity for those who maybe aren't comfortable talking about something in the group or whatever, to be able to pass feedback along to either Corey or myself, and then perhaps come back next week and ask for something more tangible. Again, I'm not even sure this has to be a motion. We're just kind of looking for feasibility.
Either way, whether there's need a motion or not, I'm in favor of looking into this a little further from my vantage point. I'd like to know a little more about how this is going to work out.
Okay, that's good.
I agree. Go ahead, Barb.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ron.
I agree, and I would say that I certainly would endorse the idea of taking a look at what sites are out there that are they're currently co-located with your stuff, and what sites you have that could be implemented to get an idea of exactly. I mean, clearly you're not going to entirely know what the coverage numbers are, but I think we all know off the top of our heads pretty much which areas have frequencies that would avail themselves to this concept. Areas where there's one or two heavily used channels, and the rest of the people do their own thing. So I think that I would definitely endorse putting more thought into this. I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Michael Wright, do you have anything you want to add
Yeah,
right now?
again, I think we just need more information. I think the one concern I have for our area is I know that, VSP already under those sites already has some very limited coverage. So from portable to hitting a tower, they can't hit that today. So then, if we put our channel on that same thing, we're not going to be able to hit them to that tower tomorrow. So, the question is, what are, looking at the maps, what are we really improving here? And we already have this VCall system across the state, which in my opinion has been completely worthless, because we have to have this whole encoding system, which we talked about this earlier on the task force meeting, that no one knows how to access that thing. So if we really needed it in an emergency, 95% of the people don't know how to turn that thing on to access it. So is it going to be another system that we're spending a lot of money on that at the end of the day is not really going to either improve coverage, or is it going to be just a channel that no one uses? But again, I think it does deserve more thought, more looking at maps. What areas is it going to improve, and looking at it further.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I would propose that we, the task force, lean on Dom and Rick and the people who have the radio expertise on the task force to kind of come up with additional questions and things we need to be considering and asking about to continue the conversation. But it sounds like that's the direction we would like to go at this point, is to plan to continue that conversation. Does that sum it up pretty well? And is that a good place to leave it right now? Just that we
Yes.
will maybe get feedback up through to, I would recommend going through Dom and Rick, because I think they've also taken a look at this even maybe more broadly and can help kind of collate all that feedback.
We have, and we've put together our analysis of it and some initial thoughts, and we'll be happy to flush those out a little further and present to the task force and further the discussion.
Perfect. Okay, so
Yes,
that sounds like a good plan for a next meeting.
Yeah, the analysis we've done we would expand to include comments that have been raised by task force members here, to ensure that, we come back, we can provide, more comprehensive detail.
Perfect. That sounds great. Everybody good with this conversation at this point, where we can move on?
I think if Barb, if I may, I
ahead.
think
Sure.
Michael Wright, I think you raised your comment was really helpful. I think I would just like to say that the idea here is from a statewide perspective. What this idea does is it consolidates your efforts for a statewide approach to VHF service, and it really pushes the investment and directs it into a single network. Certainly there are going to be if this happens, there are going to be areas that have a decrease in coverage. There are going to be some areas that have an increase in coverage, but I wouldn't look at this as the primary goal of this is to improve coverage. I don't think that is the idea here. The idea is to improve efficiency, where you consolidate the network into a single network across the state, where every part of the state would have a single VHF channel that covers that area, and it's centrally maintained. That provides a consistent approach to investment and operations for the network, and it relieves the local entities from the headaches of trying to maintain and upgrade and keep up with the technology for a digital not even digital, for a simulcast network across the state. You're not going to, this network is not focused on improving coverage. It's focused on improving efficiency and controlling investment strategy across the state. You're on mute, I think.
You're muted, Michael.
Sorry, but and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that the intention of this VCall system across the state, that we could use that or should be using that in the event I came over to Calix, responded over to Chittenden County? We have the ability to have a radio system that would work so that we communicate, because we don't have communication channels. We don't have a zone called Chittenden County where we would be able to immediately turn over and be able to communicate with them, right? So the state really hasn't talked a lot about really statewide MCI stuff. But if Dan knows this, if this were to happen tomorrow, this would be an utter disaster from a communication standpoint. And I think that while the VTAC channels, would help us once we get on scene, if that was assigned, is my understanding that VCall would be kind of this system that we could utilize. And if the system is already there, now we're creating another system that just seems to me it's not, it all just needs to be, figured out, I guess, and what system we're using. And is this system going to be the system that we would utilize? Okay, then we're going to scratch or delete the whole VCall. But if the VCall system is there and we had the ability to open that up and utilize that, then I could see money going somewhere else to improve something else, such as a statewide CAD system that we needed 15 years ago.
Okay,
30 years ago,
good.
but okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think this is all really good feedback. I'm gonna wrap the conversation up now unless there's some strenuous objection to that.
No.
Because I think we're gonna continue to have this conversation at probably the next task force meeting, if that works for Televate, to kind of present their views on this, and we can continue the conversation. Corey, thank you very
Barb,
much.
just one,
Yep. Go
sorry,
ahead,
just one
Jason.
thing to
That's
clarify,
okay.
and we do have this in the, it's either in the inventory or the system plan, I'm not sure which, but the use of the VCall VTAC channels. So first of all, that's actually laid out by the federal government, and the use of those, and it's a common misconception nationwide, but the use of those channels is more for your large multi mutual aid compact type incidents. So where you're bringing in resources not from the local region, but potentially out of state, out of region, to provide a common channel for those type entities to come over and communicate with the local jurisdiction, and not necessarily for county A that neighbors county B to go into county B and use as just a day-to-day mutual aid type system. Now, if it is, large MCI, you're bringing in, agencies from across the region, across the state, neighboring states, et cetera, that is more the intended use per the federal government, per Homeland Security, for the use of the VCall VTAC. VCall is the initial, hey, we're in your area, where do you want us to go? And then VTAC is typically where that jurisdiction that's monitoring VCall would assign them to go to be able to communicate. So just that little bit of clarification there.
Okay, appreciate that, Jason, that distinction. One more comment, Ron, and then we're going to move on.
I just wanted to disagree with some of that. When all this VCall VTAC programming happened years ago, there was some question from the individual agencies in their reluctance to want them in their radios, because they got some radios on grants, they were required to have them, and they immediately wanted to remove them because they thought they were entirely useless. And so I went to FCC Public Safety and sought clarification, and their guidance was that any incident which has, mutual aid where people are not generally sharing the same radio channels would be an acceptable use of those frequencies.
So it sounds like that could be in the mix for the conversation as it continues down the road. I think maybe some clarification, make sure everybody is understanding those distinctions as they exist. But at this point, I think we need to move on, because we do have some important work in the project updates to get to that's going to take a minute to discuss. So again, Corey, thank you very much for this really thorough presentation. It was helpful, and we will talk again, sounds like.
Happy to do it, and happy to join you when you need the updates. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Corey.
Bye.
Okay, moving on now to public comment. I will ask Senator Renner if you have any comments for today. Sounds as if no. And I don't think we have anybody else, but just in case, anybody else wanting to make public comment? Okay. Moving on then to project updates. Dom, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Barb, and I'll try and be brief here. Our activities over the last couple of weeks have focused on publishing of the updated documents for primarily the system planning document was revised. MCP addressed and reviewed and addressed those that were appropriate, all the comments that were provided from the draft that was circulated, and they have revised and we have published the final version of the system planning document, which is now on the task force website. Also, an addendum or companion document to the inventory and assessment report focused on the LMR assessment. That was also released following evaluation for necessary redactions, and that is also posted on the task force website. Then we have been focusing on putting together the process and a proposed schedule for a thorough review of the updated system planning document with the task force. So that is been the primary activity, and we have Televate has some presentation we can present to kind of facilitate that discussion. We expect the majority of the work over the next several months to be focused on that activity. A thorough review of the system planning document as we have received it from MCP. MCP has provided various options in each of the areas as requested, and now it's up to the task force to review those, determine which of those options fits our situation the best, or if there's some other option, and to provide their recommendations. So that's where our status report will be changing to also. As we have met most of the action items on the current status report, and we'll be focusing it now on that new evaluation.
Great. And Dom, you and Rick, Dan and Paul and I all had a conversation yesterday about the approach for that review of the system planning report. And we kind of tweaked it a little bit. There were some concerns. Well, I believe I brought up the initial concern. Sorry.
Yes.
About whether or not the approach of having a lead task force member was going to be effective, given bandwidth constraints for many or all of the task force members. And so we kind of took a different direction with having more of a facilitated conversation with 3 members of the task force for each category, rather than a specific task force lead, which essentially means that Dom and Rick will be the ones making sure that we're considering and talking about and engaging with all the people that we need to engage with, rather than putting that on the shoulders of an individual task force members. So you had a presentation. Do you want to go through that now?
I'm certainly happy to do that. Recognizing the time frame, if we want to engage in that now. It has a number of slides. I can go through many of them quickly, so certainly probably a 10 to 15 minute process.
I think that would be okay I would want to make sure that the task force agrees with sort of that change in approach.
Okay.
And we're going to have a 3-week period now, I think, without a meeting, right? So we're not going to meet again until June 11.
Right, that's true, because the 4th
because the 4th there was
canceled.
a
Yes.
admin problem. So so I think I'd like to know that the task force is on board with that approach today. So maybe if you could focus in on even just those slides that cover that approach, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Just quickly, if we look at the major sections of the system planning report, it boils down into these 7 areas as presented in the report by MCP. First, there was a discussion of the differences between organic and inorganic approaches to regionalization. There were 3 tiers of regionalization described, and each of them addressing various aspects of regionalization. So there's tier 1, 2, and 3. Also, there's governance, discussion on governance moving forward, and of course, how we will be funding these activities and potential cost sharing models, and then the timeline. we'd have a little more detail on each of these areas. Maybe unless someone specifically wants this, I'll kind of skip through this and we'll dive into this more directly if necessary, or certainly once we get to the evaluation process. But to skip ahead to what we recommend as the evaluation process, we would recommend having a facilitator, as Barb mentioned. In the first meeting, the facilitator would lead the discussion to essentially identify the problem or identify the issue, describe the current state, the issues and potential national trends, as MCP has done in its document, and identify the key considerations. In most cases, there are options presented along with the pros and cons, and we would facilitate a discussion on those to make sure the task force understands those and identify any specific questions or additional information that might be needed to help the task force evaluate that respective issue. In that meeting, then we would also anticipate scheduling follow-on meetings and inviting other potential stakeholders outside of the task force, stakeholders or experts in the area, to provide their expertise and opinions. And we have a table coming up to show those potential additional stakeholders. Then that would be the first meeting. Then there would be subsequent meetings on that particular issue. We would anticipate these being focused meetings outside of the regular task force discussion to focus on each specific issue. As Barb mentioned, we've identified 3 task members for each of these issues. So a task force, a group of 3 to address those, with additional facilitation by Televate, and then also additional input from identified stakeholders based on the specific areas of need. So we would have further group discussion. We would look at potential cost requirements at that level and look at the next steps. And then eventually, and the schedule is set up this way so that each issue undergoes an evaluation over potentially 4, 5, or 6 weeks, and then concludes on the week of a task force meeting where that group investigating that issue would present to the entire task force and hopefully come up with a preferred direction or recommendation. That's essentially the overall process. Rick, you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to say that, our role as facilitators would be to gather the data, the information from the various sections, and also, in advance of the meeting and during the meetings, provide that to all the participants so that, we know the reports are very thorough and very detailed and quite long. Our goal would be to assemble that information so that we simplify and condense the amount of information that the task force and other members of these groups may need to have in front of them. So our goal here would be to go through the reports, develop a presentation with the key information for us to consider, so that there's always key information that needs to be assessed is in the hands of the groups that are advancing these different categories.
So regarding those categories, so we have the 7 broken down here. There's 3, and the next slide addresses the other 4. So you can see we've identified those particular sections of the document and what each one addresses. We've identified Televate as the facilitator, and then we've identified the 3 task member group for each of those areas, and also potential additional stakeholders or experts that we might want to invite or consult with as we evaluate each of those. So take all your task force members, take a look at your your name here and see if there's any particular area that you feel you would be uh, um, better tasked with, for example, or also when we get to the schedule, if you have any specific times where you'd be on vacation or out of the office and wouldn't be able to participate. So these are the first three items. The next four items, going into the physical regionalization, governance, funding, and timeline, are shown here. We again recommend 3 task force members in each area, and then some potential additional stakeholders. Again, each task force member will find they've been assigned to 3 of these 7 areas. So each area has 3 task force members, and each task force member has been assigned to 3 areas to participate with this evaluation. And
So,
10.
Dom, can you go back to 13? Slide 13. So, well, Dom and I just didn't, dream these assignments up. We tried to be very thoughtful regarding each of your expertise and areas that might be the most of interest to you and where you have the greatest experience. Take, for example, 3.3, technology and shared system-based regionalization. Here, with Ron and Michael and Jim, we assigned practitioners. So your folks are, using the networks or using the solutions and using the applications and systems, both at dispatch and for communication to and from dispatch. So, our goal was to try as best as possible for this first draft of recommended assignments for system planning category to assign the draft members based on your specialties, experiences, and consideration to that. It may not be perfect, and that's what Dom mentioned. So look at these categories. There's also 3. There's 7 categories and 3, as Dom also just mentioned. 3. You would each be on 3 different of these categories because the numbers work out that way that everybody gets an equal share in that and working on those categories.
Great, thanks. And for a proposed schedule, we are looking at over the next essentially 6 months here to perform this substantial evaluation. Now, we were tempted at first, I guess, to go in order of the sections. We have done some switching around of those for we believe good reason. For example, we feel that governance needs to be discussed up front because that will drive a lot of decisions in the other areas. So we've grouped, and we tried to do a couple in parallel to try and meet a reasonable time frame while allowing, like in this case, the first couple, 3.1 and 3.5, allowing a total of 6 weeks of evaluation, again, ending on a week with a task force meeting. So there's six weeks here for these 2. So these 2 would be in parallel. Tried to minimize the areas where a task force member would be working on 2 in parallel. There might be some where that was not completely met, but tried to do that. We also moved up the technology and shared systems. That's the one that includes, among other things, it includes LMR, the radio systems, due to the what we just had presented from Corey and the potential time frame as to deciding if we want to take advantage of the idea he has identified. So we've grouped 3.3 and 3.2 in a similar time frame there. That's through June and into August. Then the section 3.4, the physical facilities-based regionalization. We feel this may be one of the most difficult. it certainly received the most number of comments from the public and other stakeholders during the review process. So we've identified a full 8 weeks for this process, primarily running it independent of others, although we do overlap a little bit with funding later here in the September-October timeframe. We've tried to identify or allocate 8 weeks for that evaluation. And then it seems reasonable that funding and timeline would be the last two categories to address, because certainly you'll have more information on what the funding requirements will be once we've evaluated the options in the other areas, and then also to identify what the timeline should be based on what we have recommended in each of these areas. So that's kind of a quick overview, and probably a lot to digest there in terms of the process, initial assignments, and the recommended schedule. But happy to answer any questions or provide more detail when we can.
Great. Thank you, Dom. As you were talking, I was trying to check my own schedule and the assignments that I've been given. I think it might be useful if we were to distribute this presentation and let task force members look at their assignments, look at their schedules. If you're going to be gone for 5 of the 6 weeks, we might want to reconsider. And task force members, I would ask that you get back to Rick or Dom if there's a problem with your assignment, or if you think you might be better, more useful in another category. I think that's valid too. To get back to Rick and Dom, even by the end of this week, so that we can, establish with more certainty who's going to be on each of these groups. Does that sound reasonable? I'm seeing one nod from Jim Mack and no objections. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'll be happy to distribute this shortly after the meeting here.
Okay, great. Are there any questions, comments for Rick and Dom on this overall approach? Or maybe you need more time to consider it, but the floor is open.
I like how this flows.
Okay, good. Good. All right. Well, sounds like then, Dom, we'll get, you'll distribute the presentation, and task force members will review and get back to you if any changes are needed based on schedules and expertise. Excellent. Anything else on project updates, this topic, or more generally? Okay. Jason, anything to add from the mission critical's perspective on project updates?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. All righty then. Well, then moving on, we don't need an executive session today. Is there any new business for today? All right. Hearing none, let's go to the last item, which is confirm the next meeting date. So we spoke about this quickly earlier. Our next meeting is actually scheduled for June 11th because we had an administrative support issue on June 4th. So we will meet on June 11th, and then we will meet again on June 18th and return to our regular 2-week cadence from there, unless it's determined we need more frequent meetings, but we'll tackle that one next time. So with that, I thank everybody for the participation today, and this was a longer meeting than usual, but I think it was a very good conversation, and hopefully you all did too. And if there's nothing else, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion
I'll
to
make a motion
adjourn.
to adjourn.
All right, they're
second it.
fighting over it. Okay, Emily, you can record that however you see fit. All in favor of adjourning, raise your hand or signify by saying aye.
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 Perfect. Thank you very much. There'll be correspondence coming out and we'll talk to you in person, so to speak, in a few weeks. Alrighty.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank-
Have a great
thank
day.
you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good day.
Bye.